adult Sunday school leader. We are continuing in the unit that's entitled Engaging Culture in an Ever-Changing World. We're in the second lesson, which is entitled When Life is Expendable. It's out of Exodus chapter 1 and chapter 2, various verses there. And the point of the lesson is that life is a gift from God. We are to protect and preserve. Now, last week's lesson, we had a really good conversation in our class, at least. We had some honest statements made about our own prejudices, how we can overcome those. And this unit addresses several hot button topics that our culture deals with and how we are to respond to those topics biblically. This Sunday coming up is Sanctity of Life Sunday, and it's on the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. Now, what we need to make sure we do is not make it just an anti-abortion lesson. Okay, that's going to be the main crux of the lesson. Let's just not camp out there. Here's the thing: you probably don't know the complete history of everyone in your class. The women who have had abortions, perhaps, maybe men whose girlfriends or wives have had one as well, and they are living with that every day. So let's just be sensitive. Okay, what does Ephesians 4:15 say? Speak the truth in love. So let's do that. Let's not waver on our convictions, but let's speak the truth in love. And like I said, let's not make it just about abortion, but sanctity of all human life. Okay, that includes topics like pornography and euthanasia and human trafficking, and which is composed of sex trafficking, forced labor, organ trafficking. All these things fall under the main category of sanctity of life. And we need to make sure that we emphasize those areas as well. Now, our text this week out of Exodus, it's the beginning of Moses' life. And even though the Israelites were slaves, they were multiplying pretty fast. And the Egyptians' fear was that if Egypt were attacked, Israelites would side with the enemy and escape, and they wouldn't have any more brick builders. And so Pharaoh issued this order to the Hebrew midwives that they were to kill every baby that was born that was a boy. So the long-range goal here was to lessen the number of men that could defend themselves and rise up and fight against Egypt. But it also was going to lessen those who could do the hardest labor. So it's kind of a mixed bag there. So, but here's the thing: the midwives feared God and they disobeyed this order. So the first point, as I'm looking through this, my first point is going to be, just because it's the law doesn't make it right. Now, I am definitely not an anarchist. If I break the speed limit, usually it's accidental. I'm a rule follower. And the Bible tells us that we are to obey our rulers. And just to give you some of those verses you can look up and perhaps mention in class: Romans 13, 1 through 5, Titus 3, 1, and 1 Peter 2, verses 13 through 15. But we should do so. We should obey our leaders and obey the laws of the land only when it does not conflict with God's word. We can see over in Acts 5:29 where Peter said that they would rather obey God than man. And kind of similar in a way to Ephesians 6:1, that children were to obey their parents in the Lord. Okay, obey your parents as long as it falls in line with God's word. Similarly to us, we are to obey the laws of the land, obey our rulers, as long as those laws line up with what God's word says. But here's the question: what if there's some consequences of disobeying? What if there's imprisonment or even death? What do we do then when we've got the law of the land versus God's word? What do we do? Well, what did Jesus say in Matthew 10:28? Don't fear those who can kill the body, but fear God. Okay, so that's our ultimate authority. Now, as we look in Exodus chapter 1, verses 22 through chapter 2, verse 3, we see Moses' mother gave birth to him. What's his mother's name? Jochebed. All right. There's a little trivia you might want to throw out in your class. He hid him, or she hid him, for 3 months, and got to the point where she couldn't hide him anymore. Because there's this edict that's down to kill all the baby boys. And so what did she do? She made this little basket, placed Moses in this tar-lined basket so it would float, and put him out in the rushes of the Nile. The point here for me is that we are to protect those who can't protect themselves. Now, really, this is an odd way to protect your child, is to put them in a basket and put them out in the river. But I know you've probably seen news reports or TV shows where there's this desperate mother who leaves her baby on the doorstep of some place, rings the doorbell, runs off, that kind of thing. At least there's a chance that this child's going to be rescued. And I picture Jochebed kind of like this. She's out of options. If she keeps the baby at her house, they're going to find out that this little baby is alive. They're going to come by and kill him. So what does she do? Well, she does about the only thing she can do. It's the old version of the modern day version of leaving your baby on the doorstep. So protecting the unprotected. This is why we have laws against things like elder abuse and child abuse. We also have laws against child labor, and DHS will intervene when there's a situation, a bad home situation, and remove the child. We do that to protect those who can't be protected. All right, the last set of verses here, verses 4 through 9 of chapter 2, we see Pharaoh's daughter, Moses' sister, Moses' mother, all pitched in to help this baby who was doomed since birth. Pharaoh's daughter adopted this baby who was otherwise doomed. So my point here is going to be, do what you can to help the helpless. You know, it's always been up to those with the power to help the powerless. Okay, what are some examples? Well, think about that. We'll tie back to last week's lesson on racism. It took white folks to stand up and put an end to slavery. All right, it took men to stand up and say, let's give the women the right to vote. It takes those in power to do something, to give power to the powerless. Likewise, those of us who are able to should care for widows, orphans, the homeless, the abused, the elderly, physically and mentally challenged, and the unborn. So I think we all can agree that life is precious, life is a gift from God, but the question that comes up, and that's at the heart of the debate, is when does life begin? I'm just going to give you Jim's take here. All right. Our nation prides itself on giving the benefit of the doubt to people. You know, there's the innocent until proven guilty that, you know, we pride ourselves on. We protect the rights of those in the minority. That's why we have ADA laws. That's why we have civil rights laws, is to protect those who are in the minority. Who better is defenseless and deserves the benefit of the doubt more than an unborn person? I like what Ronald Reagan said. Here's a quote from him. Simple morality dictates that unless and until someone can prove that the unborn is not alive, the unborn human is not alive, we must give it the benefit of the doubt and assume it is. And thus it should be entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, I think most of us, hopefully all of us, are appalled when we hear those stories of births in China or in India, when those babies, as soon as they're born, they're murdered due to their gender, or maybe due to abnormalities that they have, physical handicaps or whatever. But what if they were killed as they were being born? Well, I think we would still be appalled. Well, what about an hour before? What about the day before? What about the day before that? How about the 2 days before? How about 3 days before? How many days back from birth is it okay to terminate the life? Is it back to where you can first feel the kicking, which back in medieval times was called the quickening, when you could feel the quickening? Is it brain waves? Is it the heartbeat, which I think is about 6 weeks? Here's the thing. If it's unclear when this group of cells becomes a person, doesn't it make sense, if that's unclear, doesn't it make sense that we give the fetus, the unborn person, the benefit of the doubt and say that life begins at conception? So how can folks help? Here's some application. How can we help? How can we help this cause? Well, there's your local pregnancy centers, can always use donations of time and money. Perhaps having adoption groups coming and speak at your church. Supporting families, especially those in your church who are fostering or adopting. You know, and there's been a lot more of this in the last 10 years, I'd say, a lot more awareness and younger families stepping up and adopting. Is there someone in your church, someone in your class who has adopted or fostered, or maybe was so as a child? Maybe they could speak to your class this Sunday and maybe give a little report, a little testimony as to what's going on in that area. Depending on your class, okay, here's just a question you might throw out, depending on how much time you have and if you even want to go here. You might ask the question, do you find it interesting that a lot of conservative Christians who are pro-life are also for the death penalty? And how do you reconcile those two, that I'm pro-life, yet I want to put to death this person? All right. Now, yes, the lesson primarily is anti-abortion. So let's remember that all life is precious. All right. All right. Well, I've prepared this, recorded this in our church nursery for obvious reasons. So anyway, remember, all life is precious, especially those in your class. Don't forget to pray for those precious folks in your class. Why don't you take your class roll sometime? Because there's probably folks who haven't been in your class in a while. Look through that class roll, pray for those folks as well. All right. I appreciate you guys very much.